Welcome to the Become Who You Are podcast, a production of the John Paul II Renewal Center. I'm Jack Riggert, your host. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Become Who You Are podcast, a production of the John Paul II Renewal Center. I'm Jack Riggert, your host, and I'm here with Tom Hampson. Tom is a co-host with me frequently, but today he's a co-host and a guest. I want to ask him about what's going on right now with this socialism, Marxism. Seems like we're losing our freedoms. And Tom's a historian of sorts, has done a lot of work on this, just wrote a Substack on the last leg of the Long March. Tom, I'll just be a reminder to you and to everybody that follows us on the show that it wasn't long ago that you and I were banned from a local library in St. Charles, Illinois, for speaking out about pornography in schools. And I'll just make this point. America was the first democracy of its type, right? We kind of flipped this monarch, this king, the ruler over all the people on its head, and we were a government by the people, of the people, for the people, and it's amazing how democracy took off, all modeled on what the United States did. And the number one thing is freedom of speech. And when you start to see totalitarianism, dictators come in, they censor speech. And that's what I felt the most in that library, Tom, with you and I. It's amazing. Here we are standing up for kids so that they don't lose their innocence too early and get censored for that. And you see there's something nefarious going on. But this has been happening for a while, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been going on for a long time. It started ramping up significantly during the 60s in the anti-war movement that was going on during the 60s that was funded both by the Soviets and by the Chinese.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
We think that this is just a spontaneous thing that happens to kids, but just like the Palestinian protesters on college campuses, no matter where you stand with all this, they're funded. There's people that get in there, they infiltrate those student bodies. They're paid, and they get in there and they start leading these demonstrations. We think it just all happens from the goodness of their hearts, but when you ask kids on college campus today, why are you protesting? And they'll say, I hate this or I hate that, but why? What's the history of the dynamics in that region? They have no idea.
Well,
So I'm not taking a side
know.
there. I'm just saying.
Well, even when you ask them what river and what sea are they talking about,
Yeah.
from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They don't know what the river is, and they don't know what the sea they're talking about is. So it's really they're being guided by other people. They're being led by other people. And during the 60s, there was a lot of money that was spent by the Soviets and by the Chinese to help foment these protests. Certainly not all of the protesters. Most of the protesters actually were against the war. But it was these people that were driving the protests that made them much greater than they otherwise would have been. Much more violent, much more expansive. They were the ones that were being paid, that were being sponsored by the Soviets and the Chinese. And the reason wasn't for any kind of freedom purpose. It was to spread chaos and spread discontent within the United States. It was a way to drive the United States into a bad place, and that's exactly what they did. And so it really accelerated this movement to take over the institutions in the United States. That's what the long march through the institutions is what the last leg of the Long March refers to. That was promoted and actually proposed by Antonio Gramsci, an Italian communist, who said that since the revolution, the Soviet revolution, didn't take hold in all of the West in the early 30s, he said, well, what we need to do is start a long march through the institutions. In other words, slowly take over control of all elements of a culture, from the news media, the education, government, the bureaucracy, the filmmaking, music, every aspect of our cultural institution became infiltrated by people who believed in socialist philosophy, and that's we're seeing the results today. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz both are, if not outright Marxist, they're both certainly socialist. They promote Marxist ideas even. Kamala has bragged online multiple times in the press about she and Joe Biden promoting equity rather than equality. They're promoting equity, equal outcome for everybody, and that is absolutely right from the pen of Karl Marx. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need.
Yeah, you wrote in your article, and I'll make sure I link that Substack. How did we get here? Almost 70 years ago, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev said the following: "We will take America without firing a shot. We will bury you. We can't expect the American people to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving them small doses of socialism until they awaken one day to find that they have communism. We do not have to invade the United States. We will destroy you from within." I'll just add this. We have this famous Bishop Fulton Sheen, who's passed away not so long ago. But when I was a kid, Tom, he had the #1 rated TV show, believe it or not, a Catholic bishop.
I remember him,
yeah. Do you?
Yeah.
And we used to love watching him. And he always rallied against communism, against socialism, against totalitarianism. And he really spoke at it as an evil force. It's an atheistic force. And he got it right away into the spiritual battle. When I try to understand why would someone become a communist and a socialist, when you know the destruction that it's always had throughout the world, people still embrace it, and you understand it's a spiritual battle. But he wrote this. I think it's kind of interesting because I think this is how we allowed this to get here. And everything we said previous to that, this infiltration's coming in. When you and I have talked about it before, when the CCP or a communist like the Chinese want to come in, it doesn't take them much to buy off a politician. You can get a corrupt politician, you can find them, they're a dime a dozen, and to pay them off doesn't it take as much as you think. But here's what he wrote: "A nation gets the kind of politicians it deserves. A nation always gets the kind of politicians it deserves." The article goes on: "If a time ever comes when the religious Jews, the Protestants, and the Catholics ever have to suffer under a totalitarian state, which would deny them the right to worship God," here's where the spiritual part comes in, "according to the light of their conscience, it will be because for many years they thought it made no difference what kind of people represented them in Congress, and because they abandoned the spiritual in the realm of the temporal." And in other words, we didn't pay attention. We allow this stuff to happen. We get busy with our lives, let these people deal with it. And we didn't worry, Tom, what they actually brought into the political arena, did we?
Well, no. And one of the problems we have today is that people make their judgments based on the way they feel. And rather than on what they see and
look at what, yeah, bring that right into what we're doing now.
Right.
When people ask Kamala Harris what she stands for, and Tim Walz what he stands for, I'm going to throw it back in your court. What is it? Nothing.
Joy. Nothing. They just talk about joy. This is joy. Well,
what is right? Joy?
What is that? This is nothing. I know multiple people that say, "Well, I don't care about them. I just anybody is better than Trump." And I think, well, why? Because they don't like his personality for some reason. And the personality is not the problem. The problem is what their policies are. The problem isn't how they make you feel. The problem is what they're doing. And too often, I've taught people for years about how to tell the difference between good guys and bad guys. And the problem is that too often, some of the most likable people that you might know are some of the most evil people I've ever encountered. And this is a serious problem. People can't recognize between good and evil. And that is a significant danger to this country right now. And they don't recognize that people that hold Marxist and socialist beliefs are a danger to the country, the long term. And right now they're a danger to them.
You know, when you look at Europe, and if anybody's following Europe, you see what's happening in Britain, the censorship of somebody that posts something that the government feels is hate speech in some form or fashion, even reposting it. These people are being locked up in jail. There are thousands of people being locked up in jail for that. Now,
For
look,
saying something that's really nothing. It's that they're all they're doing is basically criticizing somebody for on the basis of an opinion. Say, well, this is hate speech, and you're going to jail.
yeah, and look at
Ridiculous.
we can all be against, personal vitriol. I mean, it's just not good. But our First Amendment, Tom, our First Amendment protects us from free speech, right? I mean, that's the number one thing that we have in our country. That's the number one thing that protects democracy. Our republic is free speech. That's why I said, the number one thing that you see totalitarians do is start the censorship. And how long ago was it? We had COVID, Tom. It seems
Right.
like it wasn't that long ago, and everybody alive today that's of age to vote has just gone through forced lockdowns, mandated vaccines, forced diaper wraps on your face. 6 foot distancing rules that we found out they made it all up. They
Right.
they made it all up, but it's
Well,
a
and
way
they
to
knew at the
control.
time,
Yeah.
when the vaccine came out that it didn't prevent anybody from getting sick, and it didn't prevent the spread of it of the COVID. And yet the government promoted the idea that this was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. So they basically forced everybody to get vaccinations. They kicked people out of jobs. They kicked people out of the military. They kicked people out of the government. They shut down churches. They shut down small businesses that had no power. Put hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people out of their jobs, and destroyed tens of thousands of businesses and people's livelihoods, all on the basis on the basis of multiple lies. And then on top of that, they shut down any questioning of these actions online. They just completely shut it off. And if this it can't be seen as something of the development of a Marxist ideology, people are just being blind.
They are being blind, and I think it's because of what you allude to in your writings so often, and talk about here, this long march. All the kids today have been brought up into this indoctrination. They say 70% with the polls now, 70% of young people, let's call it Generation Z and younger, are socialists. And you say, well, why? Because their parents, in many cases, look, I'm generalizing here, obviously,
Right.
and maybe even their grandparents grew up in this milieu of moral relativism, where it's just my opinion or your opinion, and there are no. This is the state we're in today. There is no objective truth. You see this all the
Right.
way through, from gender ideologies to it's okay to murder a child in the womb. Well, I'm against abortion, Tom, but who am I to tell you what to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm against, a child of 12 or 11 or 12 being put on puberty blockers, at 15 or 16 getting her breasts cut off. But who am I to tell you as a parent, what you should do with your kid or not do with your kid? And these become insane things, Tom. But to get back to your point, why are we voting for feelings? Why do we say I don't like Trump just because of some feeling, forgetting that he's been attacked from the day he decided to become a politician. Right. He's been attacked, and that guy he's got that personality where he's gonna push back. But the propaganda arm of the mass media, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, Tom. I mean, it's amazing propaganda that's being pushed out there. So I could see it. I see it around me all the time. I'm astounded by people that say I'm going to vote for Kamala, and I think, you know what? Our whole country's coming down. It's in decline, and Europe's already gone.
Well,
We're close, Tom.
I was in Air Force intelligence during the 60s, late 60s, and Pravda was
Hmm.
the
That's right.
um,
Russian newspaper.
news arm of
Yep.
the Russian government.
Yeah.
Basically, it was presented as though it was a newspaper, but it was nothing but a propaganda piece. And our news media, largely today, has become worse than Pravda ever was. They don't even seem to pretend to try to be telling the truth. It is simply they are ideological rags that are out there promoting an ideology without any interest whatsoever in the truth. Um, in order for any person to have a desire for the truth, they have to have two things. One is a curiosity to know what is real, what is right, what is
What
true,
is true? Yeah.
and the second thing is humility
Mm.
understand that maybe what they hold to be true now could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the problem that we've got, because we have people who rigidly adhere to an ideology without regard to any effort to find out what is true, what is right. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have. And certainly the news media has no interest in finding the truth. None.
And to your point, somebody asked me, what's the difference between Trump and Kamala? And we got into this little debate, and I just what you just said. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I may not agree with every single thing Trump says, but I said he's going to give me the right to say it, and we can debate that in the public forum. When Kamala comes in, you're already seeing this, and again, it gets back to this censorship and this canceling people. We've seen it over and over and over again. Why some people don't get that, Tom? It's amazing to me. Except if I look back at what I just said, they grow up in this moral relativism, and it's just about feelings. I don't think they realize how destructive socialism slash Marxism is to the individual human person, Tom. I think that's why the Democrats can put the number one item on their platform is abortion, and you go, well, how could that be? How could the number one item on their platform is abortion? How could that be? Well, it's because you're swimming in this age of moral relativism, and a baby is just inconvenient to me. So I want the right to snuff that child out.
Well, and also it's the 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 right to run for office. The Democrats have spent millions
Mm.
of dollars to keep people off the ballot. They spent millions to try to get Trump off the ballot. They've spent millions of dollars to keep RFK Jr. off the ballot. Cornel West, who's really kind of a crazy guy, but he has a right to run for office. What's the woman Stein? Jill Stein, is that her name? All of these people that have tried to get on the ballot in different states have had to struggle with their lawyers to get money to fund legal to fund their legal efforts to be on the ballot, and yet the Democrats millions of dollars to keep them off. Not out of any desire to make sure we have a legitimate election, but out of a desire just to prevent people from taking votes away from their candidate. And this is just not right.
And what does the news say? It's the opposite. Huh? We can really fall for these lies. Look at what I'd like you to do for our listeners that haven't been following us and maybe not know this. Let's talk about Kamala Harris and her potential running mate here, Tim Walz. I guess he is her running mate.
Right.
First of all, let me just set this up with saying that the Democratic Party put a man with dementia, obvious dementia, in with Joe Biden. Why do they do that? Because they want to control him, and you could see that. Now they take him out and they put an unelected VP in there now running for president. Nobody voted for her to be president on their side. But anyways, she's running. You got the propaganda arm. She's doing well in the polls. Someone that didn't poll anything at all when she ran against the Democrats in the primary in 2020. Nothing. No votes. And now she's getting the vote. So let's talk a little bit about where she came from and her background, and Tim Walz too.
She is the beneficiary of just the most massive propaganda campaign by our news media that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And yet she comes from uh, two parents, both of whom were well, her father was openly a Marxist. He's a professor emeritus at Stanford University, and
Is he still alive, Tom? Is he still alive?
yeah, he is. He's still a professor,
Mm.
but he's a professor emeritus. I guess that means you're retired, but you still
Hmm.
hold your positions. And he is
Hmm.
still a Marxist. He has been a Marxist for his entire life. Her mother, who is dead, um, uh, I didn't find any indication that she was a Marxist, but she was a radical, and she was well known as a radical. She was both her and her husband at the time went to Berkeley, and they were very active in the radical movement, civil rights movement in Berkeley. And she was a founder of the this Afro-American organization, which later founded the Black Panther Party, which is definitely a Marxist, or was a Marxist organization. So there's Marxism throughout her entire history. She was raised in a Marxist ideology household. Um, Throughout her career, she's
Yeah,
go ahead.
Tom, while you're talking, I'm thinking again, why do people come to the United States? We're a land of immigrants. Everybody that I know, four of my grandparents, four different countries they came from, they all came here for the land of opportunity, for free speech, to escape some poverty or oppression in other countries. And they came here to get a new start. Now, it's mystifying to me that those same people, my grandparents say, would come into this country and then try to turn it into the country they left. It's amazing to me. Now we know that they pick up a cause. In college, in Berkeley, you said, they pick up a cause and then
Right.
they think that, they have this oppressor oppressed model, don't they? Which is Marxist model. Somebody's oppressing me. Well, there is. It's evil. It's called sin and evil. But putting that aside, so I pick up this, this oppressor oppressed model. So it's black people or yellow people or dumb people or fat people or whatever it is, right? And now I got to stand up for their rights. LBGTQ, a trans person today, and for their rights, I will take down the whole system instead of fighting within the system, which you have a right to do. You have a right to debate in the system, to bring it forward. There's nobody here in the United States that's enslaving any black people, and it's slavery is evil. Let's face it, it's an evil.
Right.
But slavery was alive and well all throughout human history. It came here because of an inheritance of evil. But I'll tell you what the difference is. Christians, white Christian men, by the way, are the ones that fought against it and stopped slavery for the first time in history, and that was done in a democratic countries, right? That are bringing freedom in, and then what did they do? They stood up in their freedom and they saw the people that are oppressed. That's the way you work a system. Instead, we're taking down the very country that gave you the freedoms to stand up against these things, Tom. It's kind of mystifying, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And what's even more ironic is that Kamala Harris's father is from a family that was slave holding family, not a or slave owning family,
I didn't know that.
from years ago.
So they actually had slaves.
Right. His family, they probably were both
He's Jamaican, right?
uh, mixed family. So they
Is
were
he
slave
Jamaican?
owners.
He's
Pardon me?
Jamaican. He's from
Yes, he's
Jamaica.
Jamaican. And her mother was from India, and that's certainly a
A
class
caste system.
system, a
Yeah.
total caste
Yes.
system. I don't know what caste she was in, but
But we know
um,
that they're oppressing each other like crazy. She
right,
leaves there, Tom, again. And you're exactly saying what the same point, right? Like you're
right,
left there to come to a place that says, you have unalienable rights as a human being under God, not given
right.
to you by some totalitarian system. And now we want to what we call queer the whole thing, which basically just means take what's there, flip it on its head, and find the utopia that's never comes, Tom, does it? It never comes.
Well, and she's promoted all these things throughout her career about that are all the leftist kind of causes, like equity I mentioned before. She's in favor of getting rid of private health and care. She wants to keep the borders open. It's just all insane leftist kind of narratives that she wants to promote. And her running mate, Tim Walz, no wonder that she picked him. This is a guy who used to take his students or students from his schools to prolonged trips to China, like several weeks during the summer. He would take them to China, and those trips were sponsored by the Communist Chinese Party. And he also would collect. He would buy a bunch of Mao Zedong's little red books to bring back with him and distribute to people. So he had a love for the Chinese system, the communist Chinese, and was basically groomed by them to be a friend of the CCP. So, and look what he's done in Minnesota. It's just, he's completely behind all this gender ideology in the schools. One of the things he's been dubbed as Tampon Tim, because he had tampons put in all the boys' bathrooms, and he isn't completely in favor of the gender transition surgeries, as is Kamala.
Well, you think about you think about all the different things they do, right? So we have now in bed with these politicians, and this is why it's so powerful. We have all the big pharma, big military industrial complex. We have the Black Rocks and the Vanguards of the world. We have a lot of money. We have the billionaires like Soros, Bill Gates. There's a lot of money being pushed on really this totalitarian system, and it's almost unbelievable to an American. Someone like me that look at America's not perfect. We always need renewal, don't we? Because we're made up of a bunch of human beings. But at the end of the day, I never thought, even when I saw Europe coming down, Tom, I knew Europe was going to fade. I knew Europe had lost it because they had thrown out God. I saw the attack on marriage and the family there. They're not having kids. They're aborting kids that they do have like crazy. And then they have to bring an immigrant population in. The whole country changed. We all said this 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We've been talking about this for a long time, and now it's there. It's no longer, it no longer is Western civilization. And if you wanted to take it down, Gramsci was right. He's been long gone, right? But sure enough, it came to be, Tom.
You can look at it. It was right in our own hemisphere here. We saw it happen in Venezuela, with Chavez taking over Venezuela, and look at how it's deteriorated. It has completely become a Marxist state, and it happened almost overnight. Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans are now here in the United States. They had fled Venezuela because it's such a mess. So if people think that can't happen here, they need to wake up. It can happen here. It's happening right now.
Tom, I would say this. You hear this all the time. This is the most important election of your lifetime. But this really is. As far as I know, in my opinion, there has not been another election even close to this one. When Trump came in 2016, the Hydra popped its head up. That Hydra, that many-headed serpent of evil, popped its head up. And that's the deep state, huh? And this power and the elites, and they just want to get these tentacles into the whole middle class, suck the middle class dry, and take it all to themselves. You saw this with the COVID lockdowns. It made billionaires, right? I mean, billionaires and billionaires out of these people, and it's just draining the middle class. Of course, they always are throwing the poor a bone, right? Whatever, just feed them a little bit, get them in line for bread, give them a loaf of bread, and they'll vote for you. And this is it. And but the middle class is getting kind of dry here, Tom. Margaret Thatcher said, socialism works well until you run out of other people's money. And I'll tell you what,
Right.
Tom, we're going very, very quickly. And when you start to censor all the rest of the voices, if X goes down, they take down Rumble, X, that's it. You have no more free speech. And then I don't know what it becomes, Tom. It's going to be it's going to be chaos, I think, we'll see.
Well, and the thing, I think people need to begin to educate themselves on what exactly is happening. I don't necessarily think that this election would be the end, but we're getting very close to the end. We are in a position now where it could flip quickly. Um, One of the things that Kamala said was that she wanted price controls, and then she backed off of that a little bit and says, well, she wants to stop the price gouging by all the grocery stores. Well, the grocery stores only make 1.2% profit as it is, so I don't know where she's going to cut the grocery prices. The big problem is all the other printing of money that they've been doing, and that has cost each family in the United States in the last 3.5 years over $30,000 each. So that's a tax on the middle class and on the poor. And that's why we now have over $1 trillion in credit card debt, which is the highest in the history of our country. $1 trillion in credit card debt right now.
Well, this is the side, I didn't explicitly say economics, but even if you don't believe in the ideologies and say, well, I'm a socialist. Well, I'll tell you what, buddy, it's coming down for the points you just made, Tom, because
Right.
a country cannot sustain the amount of debt. Now, a socialist will come in and they'll print money. They'll just continue to print money. That's what we've been doing anyways. We're
Right.
off the gold standards. We're printing money. And to your point, it's either going to come in all that debt. People think it's free. When you get free college tuition, those loans, we forgive those loans. That goes into debt. It's going to either be inflation. It's going to stay on as debt, which has to be repaid, or at least the interest is being tacked on to that at a very rapid rate. And then or it comes out in taxes, to your point, so and with inflation, they're all going to take down the middle class, to your point, and the poor. And that's why you end up with
Well,
very, very wealthy, and then the rest of us. This is equity, Tom. This is your word,
right.
equity. We're all the same. We all wear these drab green clothes, except for the elite that are so smart that they can troll us,
Right.
and
We're
this
going
is
to be
where we're
eating
going.
bugs. We're eating bugs.
Yeah.
They're going to be eating steak.
Look
But
at
here,
Tom.
they've even destroyed the educational system.
Yeah.
And part of the
Yeah.
reason for that is that now the vast majority of people don't even understand the economics of all this stuff. They don't understand that by giving out free money to all these people, that it's costing everybody that money. It's costing us all. It's a hidden tax, that they don't understand it. They don't understand the concept. It says, well, why are eggs $5 a dozen?
Yeah.
Because
And so I paid for my own college education. I paid for my kids' college
right,
education,
me
and
too.
now I'm paying for the whole country's education.
That's
And
right.
and you think but this is equity. Equity, just so everybody understands, it's a flattening out of the rest of us. Everybody
Right.
gets flattened out. Again, we wear those drab gray clothes. You have the only middle people you have are the useful idiots that they use to run these government agencies and stuff, and they're all looking for their little piece of the pie. And
Right.
this is why I say, Tom, I think the state's gotten too big. The education
Oh,
system is corrupt all the way from college. Now it's all the way down. So if there's 4 more years of this and the economy continues to take on accelerating debt, what do you have at the end of 4 years, Tom?
well, you just you have what Biden's given us. We've
Yeah.
got
Jeez.
30, going to be $40,000 more of expenses that we've had in the last 4 years. But um, uh, I don't know what it's going to take to wake people up to the reality of what's happening right now. But
I think I tell you what, I think it's going to be, Tom. I think it's going to be a decline. I think that, like a Bishop Sheen said, he said of the last 22 major civilizations, of 22 major civilizations throughout history, 19 of them have come down, declined, and been destroyed from within, from a lack of moral solitude, a lack of objective truth, a loss of morality, values, dignity. And so they corrupt themselves. They just corrupt it inside. And this is what's happening to the United States. I think we're going to be the 23rd if something doesn't happen quickly. And I think God has to allow that to happen, Tom. You and I both talked about this in the past. God is in charge of all this. But I think for the greater good, if he wants to wake up humanity that's sleeping to the evils of all of the world and what's going on, and abortion and all these gender ideologies and on and on and on and on and on, I think he's going to let us go until people start to wake up and say, have to get back on their knees and say, "Dear God, save us from this tragedy and this devastation. You know, I'm starving to death. My kids don't have this. And then you're going to start to wake up, Tom. That's when they're going to wake up.
Well, it would be a terrible tragedy if the U.S. goes down, because the U.S., among all those civilizations in the past, the U.S. is unique. We have a unique founding principles of anything. Nothing like it has ever been tried in the world, and it breaks my heart that we are electing people like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, people who have no regard for our founding principles, who actually condemn and mock our founding principles, which is what, to me, they wouldn't have qualified. Well, certainly in the 1950s, nobody would have voted for them for anything.
No.
Tim Walz, who was a member of the National Guard, even as in the late 60s, if he was in the military, because of his love for Mao Zedong and the Little Red Book and taking money from the CCP, he would not have been allowed to be in the military. He would have been kicked out of the military with a bad conduct discharge. Nobody would have allowed that.
We were the model to your point, Tom. We were the model and the template that all other democracies that got away from the monarchs and totalitarian systems modeled themselves after. You know, right. If you think about this, in 1791, we ratified the Bill of Rights. At that point, we're the only democracy of this kind on the planet. By the end of the Civil War in 1965, there were 5 countries modeled all on America, democracies. At the end of the 1960s, when we're just talking about all this craziness started to come back in, there were almost 190 countries that were in some state of democracy, all being modeled on the United States. Since then, Tom, this long march has been going on, tearing it all down to where we're seeing totalitarians and dictators take over Europe now. They've taken over Western civilization. Look at Macron.
We've got people from the UK and from Canada coming here because because they're being oppressed in their own country. This is unreal.
So I'm going to give you the last word, but let me just interject here. I think you can only make sense of all of this if you understand a spiritual warfare. You know, it's a spiritual warfare going on. The real oppressor is Satan himself. It's evil. The one that's going to free you and liberate you, the first liberation you need, Tom, is liberation from sin. And that's we have a savior and we're going someplace. And, I don't care how much longer you're on this planet. It's not long. It's just a blink of an eye.
Right.
And you better start aiming to where you're going. Let me just read you something, Tom, to kind of go out here. These are from the last 2 popes before Pope Francis, who unfortunately is a socialist. We'll see what God has planned for him. But John Paul II said the individual person in socialism just becomes a molecule within a social organization, so that the good of the individual is completely subordinated to the functioning of the social economic mechanism. We just get used, just like a pawn, just like a piece of meat. And then Benedict XVI, who became Pope right after him, said the state, which would provide everything, absorbs everything into itself, would ultimately become a mere bureaucracy incapable of guaranteeing the very thing which the suffering person, every person needs, namely loving personal concern. love, freedom, happiness. I mean, you get back to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like you said, came right from our founding fathers. They understood this well. Our dignity comes from God. Take God out, and the most interesting thing happens, Tom. You lose your human dignity, yourself, and then you have a power oppressing you from the outside. It is really something. It's true. All I could say is at the end, the older I get, the more I realize that the story that we've been telling about God is true, Tom.
Well, and Adams even said that we created our form of government is suited only to a religious and moral people. That's it. And we are losing our religion. We're losing our morality. Our morality is becoming is evaporating into whatever anybody thinks it is for themselves.
Yeah.
And society doesn't work when you don't have a standard, and when our founding principles have become objects of ridicule, which is exactly what is happening.
Yeah. Our civilization becomes uncivilized, Tom, doesn't it?
You
Hey,
can't
God
even
bless
have
you,
a
Tom.
civil debate.
No, you can't have a so hey, God bless you. Thanks for being with me. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We'll continue to talk about these uplifting things that we have to talk about. But you know what? It's good to talk about them. You got to get it out of your system, and you got to be able to vote, and you got to be able to tell your friends to vote. If you got some friends thinking or arguing about this stuff, tell them to watch this podcast, and if they pick up your phone call after that, maybe we touch the nerve, and maybe they'll talk to you. In the meantime, don't forget to support us, financially support us if you can. Tom and I are working always on a shoestring, while Soros and the Gates Foundation are throwing billions at each other. Tom and I are outside with a little basket, sitting on a street corner looking for nickels. So throw something in, it goes a long way with us. Hey, God bless you. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.